Alright, so scholars, last time we learned all about the geography of Italy. Remember, Rome is a city in Italy along the Tiber River. And today we're going to talk about the government of Rome. So Rome is going to be very successful, one, because it's going to be really hard to invade Rome. You have the Alps to the north, you have the sea surrounding the peninsula, so it's going to be hard for invaders to try and come and take over. Although we'll see a few notorious invaders who do try in the Punic War. But the other part that's going to make Rome very successful is their government, in setting up ways that they were able to pass laws or how they organized themselves. So the power is with the citizens. Remember, they never, ever, ever wanted to have a king again. After they drove out the last Etruscans, they wanted to make sure that a king was never in power again. And in order to ensure that, they set up the Roman Republic. Right, the Republic era was 482 years of Roman expansion and conquest with nearly continuous warfare. Roman culture and civilization spread from the Hellenistic East to North Africa to Spain to Gaul and even to the British Isle. Right, the Roman social structure. Do you remember what symbol we always draw when we talk about social structure? If you said triangle or pyramid, you would be correct, and I would be impressed. Okay? So, we're going to start first with the top. Even though these people have a lot of power, there's not very many of them. And these are the patricians. So the patricians would be right here. Really easy to remember. Patricians, rich. Rich. Right? The patricians are the rich guys. All males, aristocratic landowners. They're said to have ancestry to the time of Romulus, and they formed the first Senate. Right underneath them are the plebeians. The plebeians are the majority of the population. They range from very rich to also very poor. So you could have farmers, really poor farmers, all the way to very rich artisans or merchants. They're barred from high office, so they could never be where the patricians are. And the non-citizens, right here at the bottom. And remember, I said you're going to see a lot of similarities between Athens and Rome. So slaves, foreigners, and women were all considered non-citizens, just like Athens. So even though a republic is power to the citizens, you will see that women or people who were not born inside Rome were not going to be included. Alright, who was a citizen in Rome? Look at all of these amazing Greece similarities. Only free-born males were considered citizens of Rome. So these are the patricians and the plebeians. The non-citizens are women and slaves and foreigners. But some foreigners, some foreigners, if they're wealthy enough, if they're noble, if they have land, could eventually be plebeians or citizens. But women's and most aliens, slaves, excluded from citizenship. Now, I'm not talking about Martians, right, when I'm talking about aliens. I'm talking about foreigners, people who were born outside of Rome. Rights and responsibilities of citizenship. Everybody was allowed to participate, and people were expected to vote. They had to pay taxes, and they had to serve in the military. Again, when I'm talking about citizens, I'm talking about free-born males. So I'm not talking about everybody who's in Rome. I'm talking about just these people here. Right, sections of Roman government. They had a representative democracy, which means how did people get their leaders? What they do in a representative democracy, you know this from 8th grade. They vote, right, in their civic responsibility of voting. So they had 2 consuls, right? So this is kind of like the president. It would kind of be like if we had 2 presidents instead of 1. And these were from the patricians, so the patricians would elect and appoint 2 consuls, and they were in charge of the army, and they directed the government. But they were not a king. Remember, they didn't want an Etruscan king. They drove out the last Etruscan king, and they wanted to make sure that there was never, ever, ever a king in charge of Rome ever again. All right, so they were very concerned about limiting the power of the consuls. So they had limited power, unlike a king, and could only serve 1-year terms. All right? Remember this word veto from 8th grade. They could cancel each other out, veto one another. So they had to always agree on whatever decision they were going to make. All right. Next, we have the Senate. And the Senate is going to pass laws. So I want you to write it right here. Pass laws. I'm getting better at that, aren't I? A little bit? Maybe? Maybe not. Alright, the Senate was the most powerful body because they were the upper class and they were able to pass laws. They were the aristocratic patricians, remember? Patricians, rich. These are the rich guys. These are the nobles. These are the aristocracy. 300 members, and all the consuls came from the Senate. So the Senate would elect the 2 consuls. And then you have the Assembly, and the Assembly is who would write laws. Alright, so you see this idea of checks and balances. Very influential to U.S. government. And the Romans were way ahead of the game. Alright, they wanted a balance of power. They wanted things to be fair. And so the kind of the most common people were in the Assembly. These were the plebeians. This was the majority of the population. So they would write laws, and the Senate would pass those laws. And they made laws for the common people. Much more. They were led by tribunes, so they protected kind of the commoners. So you have a pretty strong voice for all the rich, noble, aristocratic landowners. But the Assembly, the plebeians, and the tribunes were those who protected the rights of the common people. All right, so they were the most democratic. Roman law, the 12 tables. The first codified, right, so written down laws were the 12 tables. They were forced by the plebeian pressure, right, so the patricians didn't really kind of want to give more rights to the working people of Rome. But the plebeians are going to outnumber the patricians, so the plebeians are going to be able to kind of get their way. They're the earliest official laws from 451 BCE, codified, written down, and they were posted in the Forum. The Forum was kind of like the marketplace, like the Agora. And this is going to be the basis of all future Western law. So things like a right to a trial, to a jury, to being able to face your accuser, all those things are going to be part of Roman law and later really, really influence the basis of all future Western law, especially in the United States. Alright, what about the Roman military? Remember, everybody had to, not everybody, but all citizens had to serve in the military. They placed a lot of value. They wanted to make sure that their empire was always going to be able to be expanded and be protected. Maybe not empire, but republic. All citizens served. And they used infantry and cavalry. What do I mean by cavalry? What's used in cavalry? Do you know? Do you know? If you said horses, you would be correct. Alright, so their military would be like this guy. People on foot. Right? Infantry is foot soldiers. And cavalry is soldiers who are riding on horses. And they used the Manipli formation, which I'll show you a picture of in just a minute. It's kind of like the phalanx from Sparta, but even better because there was more Romans, because everybody had to serve and Rome was going to be bigger. And they would spread out a little more. And they could be used in any terrain, and it would quickly overwhelm the enemy. I'll show you a picture of that next. Alright, so here is the Manipli, more flexible than the phalanx. Remember, the phalanx was just, it kind of looked like one big fist. And here now you see the Roman soldiers kind of spreading out and again avoiding invasion. And this is going to make Rome very successful during the Punic Wars, which we'll talk about in class next time. You're going to have this guy Hannibal try so many different kinds of techniques to invade and conquer Rome, but he cannot do it because the Roman military is so fierce. Alright, so that's the last slide. You are done. How excited are you that you know all about this? Because now we're going to draw names to see who's going to be in the council, who's going to be in the Senate, and who's going to be in the Assembly. All right, so you guys are going to simulate or pretend that you are the Roman Republic next, and I think you guys are going to have a wonderful time and impress me with intense scholarship and scholarly abilities.